should be live now.
Greetings, everyone. It's important that we're here today to claim this as our space, to discuss and ground around a very important topic, a topic that has been many centuries in the making as a discussion, and to one that is really a reference of our ancestors and all of those who have put in the many years of work, of blood, of sacrifice, who have allowed us to be here today. It's important to open today honouring them and their sacrifices of the older generations, and the millions upon millions of Africans around the world whose voices are not being heard in their everyday battles and struggles to secure repairs in their communities, reparations as peoples, reparations for the destruction of their cultural identities, and what we call the Maangamizi, or the African Holocaust, which has been centuries beyond even just chastisement, enslavement, colonialism, and neo-colonialism. And so we start by honouring them and welcoming everyone to this very important session. And it's really about us understanding and understanding now the Pan-African meaning of reparations. Sure. Today is the 27th of September 2023. We're at the Houses of Parliament at Fort House in the United Kingdom with a very welcome panel that has been as an event co-hosted by the all-party Parliamentary Group of African Reparations, which was formed in 2020 on the backs of 2021 on the backs of decades of campaigning around reparations that we heard about earlier in this country, to make sure that the question of reparations was one that was seen as legitimate before not just the peoples in our communities, but the peoples of the world. And so it's on that journey that we find ourselves here to re-come to this question, because we see that at the time of escalating militancy of our peoples around the world, we are being met with equal levels, if not more levels, of violence, of repression, of eco-fascism, and attacks on our communities. And it's for that reason that we're forced to make sure that we, the grassroots voices, in link and in consonance with those rising efforts around the world, are heard and find spaces to harmonise our own voices around what we truly mean by Pan-African reparations. And so this is also an educational question. Now, in opening this event, it's important to say that this event is being co-hosted by the all-party Parliamentary Group of African Reparations, supported by the all-party Parliamentary Group of African Reparations Link, and supported by the Maangamizi Educational Trust, the Pan-African Reparations Youth Forum, the SANKOFAKUUMBA Black History Educational Complex, as well as many other supporting formations such as XR-BCAN, XR-BCAN, the supplementary campaign, the Majority World International Solidarity Coordinating Council of Community Resistance, and various many other networks, organisations who will hear from directly as part of the panel discussion from the UK on Pan-African meaning of reparations. I will now pass over. My name is Kobina, and I'm supporting one of this as part of the Secretariat through the International Network of Scholars and Actors for African Reparations of the APPGAR. And I'll be passing over to introduce the chair of this event, who is Ribeiro-Addy MP, also chair of the all-party Parliamentary Group of African Reparations, and a Labour Member of Parliament for Strength.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and welcome to the House of Commons, all of you. I'd like to start meetings by reminding people that the House of Commons is your house. So whilst you are here as guests, please feel very much at home and understand that we are happy to welcome you here at any time to discuss any issue that is important to you. I'm very proud to be the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for African Reparations. I stand on the traditions of those members that came before me, most specifically the late great Bernie Grant, who was the founder of the African Reparations movement in the UK. He first got up in this house and spoke of reparations, and we stand in that tradition because whilst it's important that the campaign is led from the grassroots, it's important that the grassroots find themselves here to push up and to make sure that our institutions, and this particular institution, one of those which, quite frankly, when you look at how the world was formed and where the British Empire stretched to, that they understand the meaning of reparations and that they take on board policy to make those reparations. And that is part of the reason why the APPG was formed. Now today we're going to be going over the Pan-African meaning of reparations, because as those who began in this campaign, some long before I was born, have a great understanding of it, what we're finding is that as we go, it has becomes a more mainstream idea. There are many that seem to be diverting what the true meaning of reparations is, sometimes dividing our communities in order to do so, setting their own agendas and not sticking true to those that have come before us and those that have been very, very clear about what we mean when we talk about reparations and why it's so important that it's a Pan-African struggle. So I wanted to go over the aims of the session today. And that would be to combat the disinformation campaign, reducing African reparations only to sums of money and definite figures as a final settlement, reclaiming and asserting the definition of Pan-African reparations in consonance with the Maangamizi counteraction upsurge currently taking place in West Africa, centralising and amplifying the demand for the All-Party Parliamentary Commission into truth and reparatory justice as a participatory democratic mechanism for ensuring all African people and their communities of reparatory justice interests, as well as bona fide allies who have their own self-determined say in shaping the public discourse on Pan-African reparations. Relevant policy making and its practical realisation that will strengthen the ISMAR and enhance the new abolitionist building of the print. Now, I also want to encourage people to support the shutting down of the Maangamizi crime scenes of neocolonialism and crime scenes of the disrespect to our ancestors, both in the diaspora and on the continent of Africa. We're calling for the harmonisation of efforts and organisation towards a united front for and around Pan-African reparations that will strengthen ISMAR and enhance the new abolitionist building of the print. So I hope we've got over what we will be covering today. We have a very, very esteemed panel. I have a very, very capable co-chair in Common, and he's going to be taking us through. But before we move on to some messages that we're going to hear on the screen, I wanted to hand over to one of our secretariat. Our secretariat for the All-Party Parliamentary Group, to ensure that it is founded in the grassroots, is a coalition of Stop the Maangamizi and For. And we're very pleased to have on catching one who we hear from Ford, who's going to speak to us first.
Thank you. Brothers and sisters, welcome to this event, which is going to be a really important stepping stone to the reparations conference that will be holding on the 21st and 22nd of October. And your deliberations today will form an important part of how that conference is framed. We want to hear from all the different perspectives that are here. I represent an organisation called Ford, and we supported the co-secretariat for the APPG, because we've been doing a lot of work in this area of currently engaged in seeing how we can get our artifacts, our looted artifacts and ancestral remains in many of the institutions in the UK returned back home. And that's part of the reparations. 30 years, been doing a lot of work to remember the victims of the last 400 years through African Remembrance Day. That is also part of the reparations agenda. So there are multiple ways that we should be looking at this, and as Bill has said, this is not just about money, it's about holistic, and as Esther always reminds us, it's about holistic repair in all the facets: economic, social, psychological, religious. So it's really important that we begin to thrash out the full meaning of that, and I hope that the Reparations Committee do that, and also welcome our allies from different struggles who understand that broader perspective. But I'll hand back now because there's a lot of talking to do, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back over to Cogna, who's going to take us through the many greetings that we have today.
So, in the spirit of this being an event that we do witnessed by our communities internationally, particularly our communities of Reparatory Justice Interest, we would first like to hear from opening greetings from Osei Ajatekpo VII, who is the Paramount Chief of Alatime in Western Volta region, Western Africa, Ghana. Who will be sharing his welcome and his blessings to the people who are here today and
Good afternoon, my comrades, friends, brothers and sisters participating in this year's African History Month. I am excited again once again to deliver to you this welcome address out of some excitement over the period of 1 year, which has seen a number of activities by the youth, where as a result of social media, to remember the fight against colonialism and imperialism by our forefathers, led by Dr. Maatubuntuman. 2 days ago, we have celebrated the birthday of Maatubuntuman, which has also brought together some of the wise sayings and revolutionary messages of Dr. Maatubuntuman, the first president of Ghana, which talked about the face of colonialism and its effect on our reparatory justice. I see this gathering this afternoon as a moment of reflection, a moment that we who are at the forefront will use as a tool to reach out to our youth. I'm so excited also about the sub-theme, education, the preparation for reparation. And I believe that education would help our youth to change their mindset and refocus their attention on the struggle that our forefathers began several decades ago, and to also use social media to propagate the message of reparation. Unfortunately, our governments have been looking at reparation in terms of payments of money. But I think that for us in Alatime, in the Volta region, reparation means the repair of the mindset through education that prepares us for reparation. The reparation that we are talking about, the repair of the planet Earth, so that we rediscover Mother Earth as the source of life. And I believe that this gathering this month to celebrate the African History Month will focus on such activities that will set our minds back to what our forefathers have been doing. let us concentrate on our youth. The playground or the battleground for reparation is in Africa. And I pray that all those spiritual groups that are scattered all over the world outside the African continent will come together with one voice and fight against neocolonialism, fight for reparation, and fight for reparatory justice. I doubt my heart for the all-party parliamentary group was chaired by Honorable Ribeiro-Addy and the members of the APPGAR group, as well as all the other freedom fighting groups that are using the Air Force money to make sure that we see the planet that we want, the Africa that we want, the planet that we want. Moment Kanuga was a Yamama Papa, Yamara White, Aya Ozinro, Aya Okabiga Revolution, Aya Nobisuswa, Aya Tilabas Letile, Adopo Pisana, Climate change, and the planet Earth, yes, Yalube, Ni Broga, Robas, Batreta, and Atolipala,
The next greeting we'll be hearing from is from Paramount Chief Obambara Kachiro-Chinde, who's the Paramount Chief of Herero in Southern Africa and around the world.
Okunena okuyepa shinene kuchava kala maruvere okujipratena mimuverire poche kuchungiwa shiwakokorwa harero. Good afternoon, Master of Ceremonies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for having me in this discussion on Pan-African meaning of the word reparation. We're faced with questions like how much do you want to debate, as if reparation means only dollar value. And then the question of it has happened so many years ago, why can't you forget and move on with your life? As if that, what happened even many years ago, as if that has no impact on our current way of life or our current economic situation or social setting. Now, in trying to answer the Pan-African meaning of reparation, I subdivided it into three sections. The first one is that reparation should address the social and cultural fabric of the African people. That is, how do we have made laws? And what are the morals of our people? How do we correct the morality or morals? How do we correct cultural beliefs or belief systems and how that has shaped or used to shape our society? Even today, if you look at this, many of our African societies are so westernized and Christianized that they do not have their own meaning of a religion. Sure. And we know religion plays a major role in, or has played a major role in colonizing our people, or even concentrating on things that are not relevant to pushing the African societies ahead. The second question is restitution of movable and immovable properties. Immovable properties, we're talking about precious stones, cultural artifacts that are lying in various museums or as properties of other people or kingdoms, whatever in other countries. We, the heroes, for instance, face also with the issue of the return of our human remains, the skulls, the body parts that have been taken from our people as they were decapitated and taken then as for scientific pseudo-experiments. These are materials that need to be returned. In terms of immovable properties, Africans have lost the land. Our land has been occupied, our lands are privatized in individual hands. So these need to be retained, these need to be brought back and restituted. We have also lost political system because either governments have been imposed, we are remnants of colonial governments, or we adhere to colonial rules. Our constitutions and all that has resembled colonial constitutions. So it's time that we rebrand, redoing things differently. The last question is a reparation that deals with the repair of the African history and collective memory. Therefore, we need to do research, how we have done things. We need to research what we've discovered as a people. We need to have our own monuments, our days of commemorations, our public holidays, and statutes that we create in remembrance of those deeds in history that make our nations great. And also for posterity of future generations to learn and build a stronger culture. Now the question that is also then asked is how are these three things relevant to the Herero case? And I will quickly move to the 5 pillars, the 5 strategic foundations of the Herero Traditional Authority. Our first pillar is a pillar that deals with governance and institutional reform. So our governance system, the authority is an old authority of 1863. So we need to strengthen our governance system, go back to how we're doing things and modernize that, make it suitable to address the needs of our people in terms of building institutions that will carry the nations ahead. The second pillar is education and training. Education is what makes nations fail or succeed or prosper. So we need to put emphasis on relevant, appropriate, contextualized, applied training and skills development of our people. The third pillar is a pillar of economic advancement and resilient livelihoods development. So we want to go into projects, we're promoting projects, we have embarked on some projects that are into ensuring that our people will prosper in what they do economically. The fourth pillar is a pillar of restorative justice and a quest for ancestral land. So that is where we find the Hereros now. In Namas, we've taken the Nigerian government on 2 occasions to the United States courts. Now we've taken the government to court for wrongly negotiating without permission on our behalf, without our permission, and resulted in a declaration that is a reconciliation agreement.
Chief and highlighting the key steps that communities are already taking in a very active struggle for Pan-Afrikan reparations. The last person we're going to hear from is now Brother Expo Kofi of the pro-criminal unity movement based out in Ghana, West Africa. Taking this now to the movement on the ground who are organising in a myriad of different ways to return to the criminalist tendencies of our Pan-African struggle.
Greetings from the pro-Nkrumah unity movement in Ghana, which participates in the Parliamentary Affairs movement through the Ghana in Parliamentary Affairs Action Dialogue. And we have set up the pro-Nkrumah unity movement as an advocacy and activist network as a result of the fragmentation that has bedeviled the Nkrumahist movement. As you all know, Kwame Nkrumah is the first president of Ghana who led Ghana on a path of anti-imperialism and Pan-Africanism. In fact, it is through the dastardly efforts of imperialism that he was overthrown on the 24th February 1966. And it is precisely because of his commitment to just restitution and the reordering of the relationship between Africa and the colonial world, the British colonizers and the imperialists. The American intelligence forces said that Nkrumah, more than anybody else, was the obstacle to their control of Africa. And that's why they sponsored territorial forces within the police and the armed forces to overthrow Nkrumah. And after his overthrow, the main thing they started was how to exclude any following offense, and then went on now with what is fragmentation. Right from the beginning of Ghana's independence, Kwame Nkrumah stated clearly that the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless it was linked with the total liberation of the African continent, which meant that he differentiated between meaningful and meaningless independence. Meaningless independence with a case in which we will continue with the colonial agenda and act as if nothing has changed, with instruction from the previous colonizers, as has been happening in Ghana after Kwame Nkrumah's overthrow. Nkrumah, after making very clear his message of what Ghana's independence was, convened and with the first All-African People's Conference, where liberation movements from all the African world were present. Later, Ghana became the home of all these liberation movements, and we were fighting for the total liberation of the African continent. Nkrumah didn't hide his feelings when he first appeared before the United Nations. And he made it very clear that the cardinal fact of our time is the momentous impact of Africa's awakening upon the modern world. The flowing tide of nationalism sweeps everything before it and constitutes challenge to the colonial powers to make a just restitution for the years of injustice and crime committed against our continent. Sure. For years, Africa has been the footstool of colonialism and imperialist exploitation and degradation. From north to south, from the east to the west, has sons languished in the chains of slavery and humiliation. And Africa's exploiters and self-appointed controllers of a destiny showed across our land with incredible inhumanity, without mercy, without shame, and without honor. Those days, he said, are gone and gone forever. And now, he said, he come across Africa, stand before this august assembly of the United Nations and speak with a voice of peace and freedom, proclaiming to the world the dawn of a new era. That the UN must face up to its responsibilities and ask those who will bury their heads like a proverbial ostrich in the imperialist stance to pull their heads out and look at the blazing African sun. How now traveling across the world with Africa's redemption. The UN must call upon all nations that have colonies in Africa to grant complete independence to these territories. Although we know that there are few territories like Ceuta and Melilla, which are still Spanish colonies, we know the British have occupied Diego Garcia, and the people of Diego Garcia are asking the British armed forces to leave so that they can return to their homes. We know the people of Spanish Sahara, under the leadership of Polisario, are still fighting for their independence. But there's not much good news from most of Africa, where what we know is that the colonial authorities, the former colonizers, imperialists, are manipulating those who claim they are the governments of those countries. Now, it's not surprising that because of that there are changes in the Sahel zone. The people of the Sahel zone, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and we have to utilize that in a way to revive the struggle for the liberation, the total liberation of the African continent. Imperialists are waging war against the liberation movements, against the socialists, in various ways, militarily, and through insidious ways of psychological propaganda. We, in Ghana, the first point made was that they tried to exclude the Second Republic, which emerged after Kwame Nkrumah's overthrow. Make sure that anybody suspected of being close to Kwame Nkrumah should not even contest elections. And we see all these things, I don't know my students who study government and history, that the People's Popular Party, led by Willie Littrop, with General Secretary Johnny Hanson, was excluded from the Second Republic election precisely because it was just suspected of being close to them. The West African Youth League, which in the 1930s provided the anti-imperialist, Pan-Africanist, and internationalist content of our anti-colonial struggle, is not mentioned at all when it comes to the history of the country, Ghana. And those who colluded with the British authorities for the destruction of the West African Youth League are presented as heroes of the anti-colonial struggle. Actually, it is important for us to educate our youth about this history. It's important for them to know how we have led to what I will always call the 24th February 1966 pro-imperialist political consensus, which is what has dominated and directs this country since 24 February 1966. We in the pro-Nkrumah movement are busy trying to work within the youth. In Ribeiro-Addy, Thursday's the current affairs session of Peki Senior High School. On Saturday coming, we are going to show the African Apocalypse film, which is on French colonialism in Niger. We are making efforts to start work also in the College of Education here, which is the tertiary institution in Ribeiro-Addy. We have connections with the Nkrumah Synod in Bishop Herman Senior High School, the Pan-Africanist movement in Maulid Senior High School. We are working collectively with movements like the socialist movement. We are working in a non-sectarian way, networking with groups like the Socialist Movement of Ghana, the Economic Fighters League. Through our work in the Ghana Internet Repress Action Dialogue, we have regular work with the youth at some meetings where the dialogue operates from. We have contacts with the Africa Student Empowerment Group in Cape Coast. We have contacts with those comrades in Accra who are working on YouTube link channels and attracting thousands and thousands of followers. We are working towards the All Africa Peoples, first All Africa Peoples Conference, the 65th anniversary, and we are calling upon all to assist us. We want to twin that with the 85th anniversary of the 5th Pan-African Conference. And then we are working towards ensuring that we get involved in elected bodies. I am contesting the district assembly elections in Peki, Blemwa, electoral area, and I'm calling all comrades who are in this reparations movement to assist so that our assemblies will not continue to be dominated by the 24th February political consensus reactions. And this is an important time for us to link across the world. I wish you all the best in this conference. And Luther continue Victoria
So hopefully we've all landed and touched down in the groove. We will now be hearing that was Brother Expo Nanny Coffee of the program used in Ghana, West Africa. We will now be hearing back from Ribeiro-Addy to reintroduce the aims of the session, and then we will be hearing from Stanford-Xosei on the Pan-African meaning of reparations rooted in repatriation and affairs.
Thank you very much, Paulina, and very pleased to hear all those very special greetings that we've had from all over the world. It's really, really important that we continue, given that we have the technology, to link up with brothers and sisters across the world and hear from them and make sure that we are united in our movement. As explained, it's very, very important that we here continue to combat a lot of the disinformation that has focused African reparations purely on the sums of money and look towards all the different ways in which we work towards that repair. And there is no other that can explain this better, in my view, somebody who I've been listening to since I was a teenager, than Esther Stanford-Xosei, and she's going to begin our panel by laying out the Pan-African meaning of reparations and how it's rooted in the repatriation of Pan-African. Thank you.
Madam Co-Chairperson Bell, Co-Chairperson Kobina, our Honourable Paramount Chiefs, dignitaries, elders, community members, allies, and all others here today. I'm actually feeling a touch emotional because I think this has been such a powerful and important meeting, because much of the discourse of reparations has become very skewed towards particular regional narratives, and Africa and African people worldwide have become decentered. Sure. And this is a huge harm that we are allowing to happen, and to different degrees have been complicit in. If we were having this meeting in the 1990s in Parliament, we wouldn't be in the position that we are in now, because the whole founding of the African reparations movement by the late Bernie Grant and others centered Africa. Yes, and as we know, Bernie Grant was African Guyanese. So many of us, quote unquote, African Caribbean people knew our Africanness, and we centered that. We knew that our lives would not matter if our homeland was not at the center, because that was the beginning of the great rupture. And now we are facing state-led anti-reparations counterinsurgency that is making us feel that our lives can matter in the lands of our captivity and in the world space that has been created by our historical and contemporary oppressors. So today is a very important day, and it was appropriate that we began with voices from the motherland to remind us as to the roots of this movement, just like the roots of Pan-Africanism, which began in our motherland, and we continued it in the diaspora. So part of this struggle for repair is about that struggle to restore our memory of who we have been, who we are, in order that we can chart that better future. We are now 30 years after the famous APPGAR Declaration of 1993 that came out of the first Pan-African Conference on reparations for enslavement, colonization, and neo-colonization. 30 years after the founding of the African Reparations Movement, and the great wealth of knowledge on the meaning of Pan-African reparations that was popularized at that conference, in particular in the paper offered by Professor Chimwezi, that really encapsulated the root of repair from an African epistemological standpoint, And many of you that have heard me speak before know that I always promote the Chimwezu framing of the ancient concepts of African reparations as being rooted in repair, the root being reparé, to repair, to repair. And that repair, he pointed out, the most important aspect was our self-repair. The efforts we made to restore our dignity, our personhood, our power, to transform our condition and our material realities, and to wrestle back all those resources that have been stolen and looted from us. That could only be done by a people on the march in creating their own story, their own narrative as to who we are and who we want to be. And this fundamental essence of repair is being lost. And that is part of not only the state-led anti-reparations counterinsurgency, but also the movement capture and the elite capture. Elite capture is important here because that is where resources that have been built up intergenerationally by our people and communities worldwide become extracted again by particular elites, whether they're academic, whether they're political elites, whether they're economic elites, whether they are quote-unquote ethnic elites in a society, and they usurp those resources and misdirect them for their own ends. And that is what we are seeing now. And we must not stand by and let this happen.
Speak on.
Our ancestors, yours and mine, worked too hard for this time. Why should the most elevated in terms of their position in the global system of white supremacy racism be the ones that define the future reality of our society? They will never be able to bring about the change that our people are fighting for.
Never.
Because they are too comfortable. So, the class dynamics. We don't like to talk about class.
Talk it.
But we have to talk about class. It's not just race. It's class, it's race, it's sex and gender. It is an intersectional struggle. But I particularly mention class. Because even as women, we can be women of the hegemon. Yes? We can stand by the hegemonistic men that are doing a lot of the misleading. Because we also can be very well positioned, as we are seeing with some state actors, even in the Caribbean. So, the meaning of reparations. There's a politics and there's a battle of ideas going on for the dignity and meaning of African people's repair. And part of the largely untold history of reparations is the struggle not only for reparations itself, but also the struggle between different distinct black classes, if I can use that term, over the strategies for citizenship and the right to envision the racial future. That's a quote from Professors Ajua Ayatoro and Adrian Davis, focusing on the movement led by our people in North Abya or North America. But essentially, there's no universal word or definition of reparations that fits all groups, peoples, nations, and cultures. Every people have to define reparations according to their own interests as a group, not according to the interests of the elites within that group, who benefit from the world order the way it is today. And many of our past freedom fighters were reparationists. We heard already about the 21st of this month being the birthday of Osajifo Kwame Nkrumah in in 1909. Yesterday was the birth date of Winnie Mandela in 1936, an illustrious foremother in the struggle for repair and the restoration of Africa and African people worldwide. Why are we denying their legacy? Why are we spitting on their faces? By allowing presentism to guide our strategies and tactics. Have we given up? No. Have we given up? No. Have we forgotten our purpose and our mission? No. So that struggle for reparations, like all struggles, begins with a need for a clear conception of what we want, how we define the issue and explain it to the world, and also what is to be done to achieve it. And so I want to just very quickly, in the little time I have left, give an overview of a framework. I wouldn't really call it a definition, in terms of the meaning of African reparations. Because we are the people that birthed humanity. Yeah. And in that process of Africanizing and humanizing the world, we have created knowledge. And it is that knowledge that we have to draw on in guiding us as to our decisions today. That is why you've heard from various speakers on the importance of education. And even in the UK, as part of the African Emancipation Day Reparations March Committee, of which I'm part, we have a slogan: education is preparation for reparations. And that educational journey is a journey of lifelong learning. We continually grow and evolve. And we have to evolve our notions of repair to suit our current circumstances, but also to project ourselves into the future as to the kind of world that we are fighting for today, that we may not see, but those that are coming after us will inherit. And so the meaning of African reparations I'm putting to you includes four main aspects. The first being, we have to harmonize the meaning and approaches to reparations or repair for African people globally, centering African epistemologies, that is our ways of knowing and being, and restoring substantive African representation to self-determinedly speak and represent our sovereign people's power in defense of our interests, geopolitically, as African people on the continent and in the diaspora. So by substantive African representation, no disrespect, Sister Bell, I don't mean voting for black MPs. No disrespect. Because we have to be, as Bell has said, we have to challenge this power with our own people's power. But substantive African representation means we have to go beyond descriptive representation, where we have MPs that are a lot like us, from our community, may speak the language we speak, but they represent ultimately institutions that we do not control as African people. Substantive African representation is where we have a right to shape the ideas, the politics, the goals, the strategies and the tactics that we are advocating for. And that means that we have to build autonomous institutions of our people's power, locally, nationally, and internationally. And it is those autonomous institutions that ultimately can hold to account our elected officials. Yes. So it's not that they cannot represent so-called, what I call white stream political parties. They can, but we are the ones that should be fielding those candidates, and they are accountable to us. That is substantive Caribbean, some in America. And we are these dichotomized, atomized people that do not recognize that we have to globalize our sense of African personality in order that we can harness our people's power to effect the changes that we want to see. The second aspect of reparations from a Pan-African perspective and meaning is that we have to reclaim Africa. Africa is being recolonized right now as we speak. And that is why you have revolutionary upsurges to stop that Maangamizi of neocolonialism today. Contesting European imperialism, whether it has the face of the French or the British or the Portuguese or the Spanish or any other European peoples. That is part of the defense of African reparations, because they are fighting for their rights to sovereignty. That is what was stolen from us, our sovereignty. Our land, our right to belong to our land. And now, even today, many of those lands in Africa are owned by oppressors and colonizers. Why do we have to buy land back in Zimbabwe? Why was there a compensation deal to the white farmers in Zimbabwe? Namibia, South Africa, Kenya, we can go on. That's not repair. Because before you can repair, you have to stop the harm. And that is why reclaiming Africa has always been part of our people's goal. Why is that being lost in the Caribbeanization of African reparations? Why? And if you follow the social media output of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, you will see most of the spokespersons are the heirs of slavery and the repair campaign. Go and check them out. Repair campaign funded by Dennis O'Brien, the Irish billionaire in the Caribbean. Let's not talk about the destruction that was done in Haiti. These are the spokespersons now. Now, what is that doing? That is part of the state-led anti-reparations counter-insurgency.
That's right. Talk it again, sister. Talk it again.
And I have to tell you the truth. Because this is about the integrity of what I stand for and the movement that I was birthed in. And it is about the past, it is about our present, and it is about the future world. And I will not be committing ancestral treason. Because that's what many of us are doing. Because of short-term gains that we feel we can win. We commit treason against our people. Not on our watch. That's right. That's right.
On our watch.
So when we are reclaiming Africa, we do so we engage in that struggle to transform Africa, to wrestle back our homeland from the forces of domination, external and internal. Because we always had the internal oppressors, the fifth colonists that work with the external oppressors. Okay? And we need to speak about that as part of the repair. But why are we doing that? We're doing that not just because we're fighting against something, but it's also what are we trying to build? And for us, we are reclaiming Africa through that process of what's called rematriation. Now, rematriation is the oldest notion of African reparations. From the time that we were kidnapped, in terms of the recent phase in the early 1400s, we wanted to return. It was a physical return, but it was also a spiritual and cultural return to Africa. And that is also about returning to our way of life, returning the sacred to the mother principle that was essential for the balancing not only of Africa, but the world and the rest of humanity. And what we are generation that we have to reconstruct in a world of collapse.
And decadence.
A world of polycrisis and collapse on multiple levels. But yet we still, like the phoenix that rises, we have to rise. Because that is written, and that is our destiny and purpose and our mission, and why you were born today. And why you are here today. I'm going to be finishing, just give me 2 minutes. And that rematriation includes the right of us not only to belong, but to return to Africa. The right of us in the diaspora, but also the right of those on the continent. Because that continent, that was those borders that were created in 1884, 1885, are a massive cause of the civil wars that still happen in Africa. The so-called ethnic and national tensions that privilege certain groups that actually we are seeing today. We heard about it in terms of the role of the government of Namibia in trying to negotiate a compensation deal, excluding the Over-Herero, Nama and other affected people that experienced genocide. Because the Africa that is there is not an Africa for Africans. So those borders have to be transformed as part of the repair and recreating an Africa in our own image and likeness, according to our own people's values, and the best of those is what we emulate. And that is why we refer to that holistic, anti-imperialist, pluriversal nation state, plurinational nation state as Maatubuntuman. That is a Pan-African union of communities founded on the best of our African traditions and culture and knowledge systems of Ma'at and Ubuntu. Ubuntu recognizing that we are people through how we also treat other people. And it's called different things, but essentially this is what we have gifted humanity. And that is for us the quintessence of our struggle to restore ourselves and our peoplehood, so that we can again be in the driving seat of redirecting the path of humanity.
Thank you.
That is what we have to do. Because right now, people who have come out of us, and some I'm not so sure, are actually controlling the space, militarizing, destroying polluting the earth, polluting our water bodies, our food systems, and so we have the slow genocide. That's not only killing us, but it's killing all peoples and all life forms and all our relations. So establishing Maatubuntuman, which is the repaired Africa, not the Africa, the Lusophone Africa and the Francophone Africa and the Anglophone Africa, but the Africa for Africans, as the Honourable Marcus Mosiah Garvey and other Garveyists have been advocating for decades.
The China Africa.
It also includes the total pursuit of African liberation from the Maangamizi of neo-colonialism or neo-colonial enslavement. So you cannot get to reparations without struggle, without stopping those systems of the Maangamizi that continue in our lifetime. And chattel slavery is still continuing, but it's not the dominant form of oppression for our people. So that pursuit of African liberation, and that is why the African liberation movement, Pan-African liberation movements, anti-colonial movements have always been at the center of our repair movements. It's not something different. And finally, what purpose? What's the kind of world? We want a world, we want a repaired Africa that exists in a multipolar, pluriversal world of global justice that we refer to as Ubuntudunia, okay? And we want a world of planet repairs. That is that nexus between cognitive justice, reparatory justice, and environmental justice. And planet repairs is the ancient, the modern version of the ancient formulation of repair known as Suruj Ta, from our peoples of ancient Kemet, Suruj Ta, okay? And they spoke about the need to restore that which is in ruins, to separate, to rejoin that which has been separated. It's a really phenomenal exploration of repair from the ancient African peoples in the land today that is known as Egypt, but it was called Kemet. And that is called Suruj Ta, which is really to restore and renew the world in the process of repairing and restoring ourselves. Okay? Other people have similar formulations, but the original template comes from us. Okay? It comes from us. Now, all of these, in terms of the meaning of African reparations, become central to the strategies, the local. So we are organizing locally or within a national context, but we are thinking and we are linking globally. Okay? And they become central so that we become one people, one nation, that we actually recognize the cultural unity as Sheikh Anta Diop and others have, as our historians have actually been teaching us and humanity. And even that struggle to tell our own story is one of the tenets of this battle today. Because there's an attempt to erase and minimize and trivialize and demonize our story. Yes. In the process of humanizing the world.
Right.
Yes.
Target.
So that really is all I can say. That's all I've got. I could go on forever. But that is all I can say. That's all I've got time for. And I've already taken more time than I should in terms of the Pan-African meaning of reparations. And all of these speakers today are going to speak to different aspects of that to elaborate on things that obviously I could not cover. Thank you.
Whilst you are speaking, I think that was a brilliant way to open very, very much and set the scene. And I do not take offense at all because you like me, it's the other ones that I have to worry but you're absolutely right, diversity is not representation. And just the many things that you went over in terms of what we are being informed by, that is one of them. That is absolutely not representation. Representation is when you meet the demands of the people that you claim to represent, and that is what you have laid out so clearly. We have a special message. Would you like to explain?
Yeah, so just as a new addition to the program, we have a special message that has been directly been shared from Citizen Nyami in Niger, who was invited to participate in the event and would like to speak with the chair of the Pan-Afrikan Reparations, Ribeiro-Addy. So please do allow us 1 minute just to work on this solidarity message with our family.
I've been trying to do that since I've got the declaration. There's the power supply issue. Yeah. I'm not too sure. You could try. You can try.
Please keep it down. Please keep it down so we can just try and get this running.
No, my link is actually plugged in. Have you checked it's plugged in?
Yeah, I've checked all.
Parliamentary Group for African Reparations. I understood that you had a message for us, so we're at a meeting in the House of Commons. Are you happy for me to put you on speaker to speak to the meeting? So would you say that again? Thank you very much, and we are sending you solidarity and greetings from this meeting here in London. Of course.
Babysitting. Comment number.
This is federal. Would you mind to repeat again? While you were talking, there was one case here. Would you mind to repeat? Would you mind? Let's get the good secretary at the front of the line. I think it's not like to do it. No, I'm not doing it. No, I understand.
Thank you.
Okay. So that just before we introduce your movement and activities, this is the correspondence yesterday. Okay. But due to the protocol, we need more time to get back to you. But we definitely get back to you. Thank you for all things you are doing very much. Thank you very much for all things you are doing for Niger, Pan-Africanism, and planetary repair education. Right?
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
So,
Obina, maybe you can just explain. He's a government official in Niger. So we have sent them a letter yesterday. So they have received the letter only yesterday. They are due to the protocol in the government. They need more time to reply to us officially. That's why to show us that they are willing to support what we're doing. That's why he said, okay, you can really call to support what we're doing, but they will get back to us.
So a very, very important message. Again, I think really introduces very nicely what we have to talk about next, because that was a voice representing the interests of the Committee Nationale for the Safeguard of the Homeland, which was the movement that took power in Niger through military power backed by peoples, and is currently organising to continue the defence of Pan-Africanism as it's emerging now in the Sahel region of West Africa. So we send our solidarity from this meeting particularly to those there who are really putting their lives on the line. So you can imagine that was quite an overwhelming contribution to this session. The next contribution really at this session is about, has its title is Pan-African Reparations as Stopping the Maangamizi of Neo-colonialism in Africa Today for Pan-Affairs. And I say this as Governor, as one of the coordinators of the Pan-Affairs Action Learning Education Revolution, and also part of the Secretariat, as mentioned, with the Pan-Afrikan Reparations and INOSAAR. And so really we really have to now move to concretizing this idea of Pan-Afrikan reparations. We know that this is a concept, it's an ideal that our ancestors from time immemorial have established and set us out on a path to. We know that this idea of what Pan-Afrikan reparations is, that Maatubuntuman and Ubuntudunia, as we call it, or Pan-African Union of Communities, in a multipolar global justice world, is now emerging. And we know that these very high standards that were set out, we sometimes don't even have the words or language to conceive of and describe what it is that we're striving for. What does Pan-African sovereignty look like? What will it look like to do justice to the blood that is being spilled on a daily basis because of the Maangamizi system of white supremacy, racist, colonial and neo-colonialism that we are all forced to bear and put up with every day? And what does it look like when fascism, and we who are in the belly of the beast of fascism right now in the Houses of Commons of the United Kingdom, is worsening, and it's being taken out not only on young people all around the world, and our families, being ripped out of our homes, kids being forcibly miseducated, if they don't like those schools, being pulled out of the miseducation system into a worse system that will take them to prison, which looks like occupied lands around the world, which looks like lands that have still not yet been given back to any of the indigenous peoples. It looks like people of this country whose names are completely silenced and marginalized, people like Julian Assange, who's a political prisoner of all of us. I dare say that he's a Pan-African political prisoner, because the truths that he shared were about the truths of colonized peoples all around the world. And so when we talk about Pan-Africanism and we talk about internationalism, this reparatory justice extends beyond those of us who have a colour skin. That means we potentially came from the continent of Africa, that we came from the continent of Africa. It means all of those, like Nkrumah said, for whom Africa was born in. And Africa was born in each and every single one of us. The issue we have, however, is that we're not educated about who we truly are. We still don't yet know who we truly are. And those who are fighting to show us who we truly are, the hundreds of thousands of Nigerian people, young people, that surrounded the French military base for 8 days, solid. Think about the supply lines to make sure that everyone was fed, to surround the French military base, to make sure that the French ambassador was kicked out of the country, and that they could take back their sovereignty. Those are the people that are showing us what it's like to be truly African. And they don't have a dime or a dollar that this system is pillaging and circulating into the random pockets of criminals who look like teachers, who look like policemen, who look like me and you when we don't choose to pay attention to the actual situation on the ground of our family, of our brothers and sisters who are suffering every day. And so we've got a serious responsibility to change this idea of Pan-African reparations, to embody it and to live it. And that's a challenge that's been set out to us from the solidarity message from our brother who just spoke before us, from Stanford-Xosei, but also from Xosei, Detector the 7th, the Paramount Chief of our team, who is setting out these practical pieces of work, the Paramount Chief of Owerera, and their work to restore the dignity of Owerera and Nana and all indigenous peoples in Africa. As well as us hearing from Royal Expo Nani Coffee of the pro-Nkrumah Unity movement. And that's important because it's people like Nkrumah who set out these high standards and these plans and strategies for us to win as a people and to come out from underneath the foot of imperialism, that we need to return to so that we can improve upon that legacy in the present day time. And so I would like to add that this question of Pan-Africanism and stopping the Maangamizi is a very real and practical task, as has been demonstrated around the world. But we have to put this in context of why this event had to be called. Not long ago, the president of Guyana was interviewed on live widestream media, and he made clear to associate reparations with money. This was given a lot of media attention, and many of people who look like those from our communities share this stuff around, pay attention to it, and think it's of any value to the people that are getting murdered on the streets of London. So what value are we putting on the dead bones of our ancestors when we entertain this utter bull that comes out of people that aren't even in the struggle, or aren't even paying attention to the people who are struggling? Following that, it was the president, before that, it was the president of Barbados. A lot of attention was being given to this discussion around how many trillions or millions are our dead ancestors worth. When they did that, the BBC, another Maangamizi institution, went on to make sure that this had a big platform. They made sure to share that information and started to have these pseudo-negotiations with essentially the people that they left to own the plantations that they left behind in our parts of the world. The most ironic of these has been the president of Kenya, has been the president of Ghana, who at the United Nations Assembly also associated reparations with money. But if you ask the ordinary people of Ghana, or the ordinary people of Africa, who these people are, they will tell you that these people are murderers, these people are killers. They've literally ordered soldiers to fire upon school children protesting to fix their roads. Just the other day, when the Fix the Country movement in Ghana, celebrating Kwame Nkrumah's birthday, occupied Judobi House, or the Thieves' House. They were surrounded and brutalized by the police. They were legally arrested, illegally detained for exercising their rights to self-determination, exercising their rights to demonstrate. And these are all the rights, these are all the God-given rights that are written in these constitutions that were written by colonial establishments and their colonially miseducated lackeys who do their bidding on the continent. So the Maangamizi, this attack that we're talking about, this African Holocaust, is very, very, very real. We know that. And it's not fair, and can no longer be allowed that same establishment minority, who literally today are illegally occupying our lands, from Sudan to South Africa to West Africa, to anywhere you look, to our communities in this country, that they, who have no respect for our citizens, can talk about the things which are dear to our ancestors. And this is an educational issue. This is fundamentally an educational issue. Because who here has ready access to the immense amount of knowledge that is being produced by communities in struggle on a daily basis? Who are developing new tactics, not just for survival, because the politics of survival are not the same as the politics of generation. And some of us have got too comfortable surviving in a system that is now telling us very openly that it's going to kill and take this whole world with it. So why aren't we digging deep into our ancestral knowledges and making sure that there are no more generations that have to go through the same bullshit education that has brought us to this point? And that education doesn't only look like discussions or the reports that are written in their establishment institutions. It looks like the face-to-face learning that we've got just from this discussion today that are already the knowledge that's produced within our communities. So let's pay no more attention to the institutions that are perpetrating the crimes and make sure that places like this are the spaces that we harmonise our efforts. We today have made sure it's clear that the Houses of Commons, as a Maangamizi criminal institute, is a contested zone of our people's power and all colonised peoples around the world. And these are the types of truths that we expect to hear from places like this when we organise. Now, as of this week, it's important to make sure that we understand that Pan-Afrikan Reparations has been meted out by serious forces of organised peoples. The French ambassador, as of this week, has been forced to withdraw from its legal occupation. And again, this wasn't just about military leadership that this establishment calls terrorists. This was about hundreds of people assigning to their destiny the truth of what it means and to be taking action in a very concrete real sense. And this is following the leadership of Burkina Faso, of Mali, of the national transition governments there, and the military defense pact that they've signed, which is uniting African efforts and demonstrating that this is going to be about uniting our efforts because we have a serious victory to win. And it's not about any identities, personalities, or tendencies that can be decided after we reorganize and secure our national liberations, which means the liberations of our people, the liberations of our indigenous communities away from the stranglehold of this system. And so it makes total sense that we remind ourselves of all of these things that are happening, because this counteraction of the Maangamizi, while that is happening, there are people in some other room somewhere else having conversations about how much can be paid out. Yes. So while you have negotiations with the people that are giving weapons to the people putting down your resistance to rebellions, instead of us organizing ourselves as a Maatubuntuman to resource the efforts of our communities on the ground, who every day are facing the stiff end of the Maangamizi. That's an educational issue. We have to keep coming back to education, and an education that's about planning repairs, because until we can wean ourselves off of this dependence on the monopoly this system has on the information of our people are fed, with our own institutions, so that our people are led by the indigenous knowledges of the over-railroad community, of the accounting community, of those who talk through processes that we're now building through the SANKOFAKUUMBA Pan-Afrikan Community Global Education Complex, which has educational initiatives emerging from the Reparatory indigenous nation of West Africa, is now building connections into the over-railroad communities, is building connections into East Africa as well, and allowing us to harmonize these efforts, because it's no longer enough that even if we have revolutionary forces on the ground emerging, that they don't know that it's not just the French who need to get out of your country, it's Britain, it's the US, and it's all the other weapons that they've left behind to other terrorists who they've indoctrinated with their own ideologies. But they won't know that if they don't know that inside the United Kingdom, we are clear that Britain's fascism is the same fascism that is being meted out in Burkina Faso. It's the same fascism that we can see in the Chagos Islands. And it exists throughout Adiyala, the so-called Americas, and in Asia too. If we don't secure that unity and make sure that our message is clear about what we mean about Pan-Afrikan reparations, which will happen through an educational revolution, we'll be stuck marking time, not allowing the true information that needs to be shared in this moment to be shared. And part of that looks like returning to Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which explored very clearly what you have to do when you're in the last stage of imperialism, which is the most violent type of form that this thing has left, because it's still trying to hold on. Now that handbook isn't readily accessible on the continent of Africa. That information of our ancestors does no longer exist. In universities, you can do a whole degree on international development, economics, or history, and you'll come out not knowing the single name of your ancestor. So this starts from us, it starts from sharing this knowledge, and it starts from making sure that what we do here is duly connected to defending the emerging contested zones on the continent of Africa that looks like Niger, looks like Burkina Faso, looks like Mali, looks like Eritrea, and their people's efforts to hold on to the forces resisting at community levels, who are organising communities for self-defense because they're not just waiting for the establishment to provide any handouts. It looks like the people who have been doing this for centuries in places like Sudan, and the forces that are still left that we need to find before they die out, so we can respect our elders who laid down the blueprint from the Mau Mau rebellion to the still alive Black Panthers who are still locked up, some of them, and the many, many other forces whose names will never be established in any written history book that's provided by this education system. And so we leave this, I'll leave this section just understanding that when we talk about this Pan-African action and education revolution, it looks like the everyday things that we do to make sure that our indigenous knowledges are respected, but that we harmonize those efforts so that we don't lose the knowledge that is being won in one area of our struggle from the Maroons, say, because we're busy paying attention to something else. And we share that knowledge and beam it directly into our communities, so that at that time and that point, when these idiots are going on TV to demand reparations and talk about money, there is a unified grassroots force who knows clearly what it is our brothers and sisters on the ground actually do want in Niger at this time. And that's where we have to move this off, and that's where Prela takes us forward. And it's really the invitation for communities for us to walk hand in hand and harmonize efforts for an educational revolution.
Moving on to something which, a subject matter that you really touched on in your remarks. We are now going to be hearing from Dr. Sahidi Bilan and Kader Abdul-Musi from Niger, from the African People's Complex towards Pan-African Reparatory Justice. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk about our country and to explain the political crisis which right now is going on in our country. Thank you so much for supporting us as well. So we are both from Niger and originally also from Mali. So it means that we're more suitable to talk about that region because my father was originally from Mali, my mom from Niger, and the same applies to Ghana as well. It's just a coincidence. So it's important to understand that Niger is the biggest country in West Africa. The size of Niger is 1,260,000 quadrat kilometers with 26 million people. But Niger is not known because very often confused with Nigeria. So Niger, although it's the same people, Niger was colonized by France. So Niger is like let's say an ecological catastrophe because very, very rich. We are one of the top producers of uranium, bauxite, lithium, gold, diamond. There's even the drink water we have in big quantity which can feed the whole Africa for, according to research, for more than 200 years. So, but Niger is paradoxically the poorest country on earth. Why? Because 1 kilo of uranium is being bought by France for 80 pence. 80 euros. Why? 1 kilo is sold on the world market for 200 euros. So people live very, very poorly, and many people live on less than $1 a day. So what France has done, they bought 60 years, more than 60 years of exploitation. Yes. We know what's going on, but we can't say anything. But we try, as intellectuals. But they know how to silence someone. So what they did, they brought and they back up a very dictatorial, apparently democratically elected regime, but in hidden, it's actually a support. It's just a government which is there to do whatever they want. So Mahamadou Issoufou has been president for the last 12 years. That guy was previously one of the civil servants of Comina, which is the organization, the company which was exploiting uranium in Niger. So he worked for them. So you can understand now, if you become president, it means that he has been selected, not elected. So 12 years, France has free access to uranium. Only God knows how many kilos or tons they took out of the country. When he came to the end of his mandate, they prepared Bazoum Mohamed, a philosopher who was, by the way, a friend of mine. That guy, sorry, I'm not being racist, but the constitution says in order to become president, at least one of your parents has to be from Niger. This guy came to Niger at the age of 8 from Libya. Neither his mom nor his dad were from Niger. But they succeeded to elect him as president. Fine, no problem. So,
Big problem.
Big problem. So we understood that when he came into power, all what has been doing is actually granting, free access to France. And now what we understand also, we came to understand that insecurity is and terror are now the new strategies which they put forward in order to come and recolonize, the countries. Which means the terrorists operating in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, the facts they have been trained and armed by France.
Yes.
So it's not made up, it's real. We have evidence of all this. And what the deposed president, Bazoum Mohamed, on the 26th of July did, he is actually a secret agent of France. So he is the one who dealing with terrorists and at the same time fighting terrorists. So this is a paradox. He himself stated that he freed more than 8 terrorists. When he was asked, why did you free them? He said, no, they are our allies. So obviously the military was very upset to understand that basically they have been killed. When they catch them, then what they get from them, the government, is that they are allies. So how can you fight allies? So it means that the terrorists actually are there to make life difficult so that they can justify the presence of France in Niger. Can you imagine? We have 3 French military bases in Niger, 4 American military bases in Niger, 1 German, 1 Italy, and 1 Emirati. So which means that the whole country is taken, is not in our hands. So if at least people are better off, then we can understand. And Bazoum went further to say that the terrorists are more capable and more equipped and more hardened, than the military. So how on earth, as chief commander of the army, you can tell your military that they're weaker? So this is discouraging. So that's one of the reasons why they deposed it. Yeah? So it's important to stress that Niger is also neighbor of Mali and Burkina Faso, and in all these countries, there were at least 4 coups d'etat. So there are also French-speaking countries as well. In Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, and in Mali. So, but the reaction of France regarding the coup d'etat in Niger was like an earthquake. So they mobilized the how do you call it, the regional organization, which is called ECOWAS. So this is the economic organization to military intervene in Niger to depose the military and to bring back Bazoum Mohamed. And I don't know if you watch what's going on in Niger. The military is backed up right now by more than 85% of the population, because people are fed up. People are hungry. So bringing back Bazoum with the argument that he has been democratically elected, which is not valid at all. He has not been democratically elected. He rigged the elections and been selected. Yeah? And he is not there to defend or to advance the interest of the country, but to advance the interest of Niger. So that's of France. So that's why Africans realize that individually they can be destroyed. So Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger came up to form an alliance in order to defend themselves. So despite all the threatening, going on, despite all the, how do you call it, all what they undertook to destroy Niger, but it did not work. So finally, the ambassador, as you mentioned, has to leave because the people are more determined. The people are ready to die, to defend the country. So finally, the guy is gone, and the military is due to leave as well.
Yes, yes,
So, as you can see, individually, we think that for the first time, an authentic, real, endogenous organization, alliance is taking form, is developing in that region. And that's the way we think of, let's say, a prefiguration of African unity. It's not manipulated from outside, but genuinely, organized by poor countries, but who are very rich. So people want sovereignty, they want self-determination, and they know that they have potentials to develop. So there is no anti-French sentiment in Africa. No, it's not that Niger people don't like France or Europe or the West. No, but what we are against is basically this external political stance of France, which is more predatory, which is mostly based on taking, not giving. So what we want is a win-win relationship with all countries, open to everyone. So they can at least maybe learn from Britain. Britain does not intervene directly. They at least give you a free, yeah, at least they you understand? But direct to rule.
The worst. The worst, at least the French people know they're not good.
So, we intellectuals, we are more determined to back up this military, junta, as they call them, authorities, because we are, although I'm against, any type of government which comes through the use of violence, any type of seize of power, by anti-constitutional means, but given the fact what they put in place is the only way to remove it. The only way, because people are not even allowed to express themselves. They cannot protest, they can't do anything. Apparently the democracy, but in reality it's not democracy. So what is going on in Niger and what is going on in that region is that France always tries, in the name of democracy and in the defense of human rights, to colonize people and to squeeze them and to steal what they can steal. So that has come to an end. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. As we've seen what's been happening in the going back and forth, it's sometimes difficult to grasp everything, but that has been one of the most educational pieces that I've heard of this. So I thank you so much for that. Are we going to hear from Abdul-Mosi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is
No, yes, brother.
Yes, from Niger and Mali, like Dr. Steve said, we are all the same people. We don't believe to use colonial borders. We are all the same. So, like he has explained everything, and everything has been said by the predecessors. So, if I can talk about the reparation, like I just want to say that in Niger, like my predecessor said that reparation is not about, it's not a financial purpose, It's just a result for the mindset. If you mess with something, you need to fix it. Because like there's a psychological damage on us. Everywhere in Niger, in our countries, when we walk around, we see what has been done by the colonial power. And we can see the grave and the memorial of those criminals. But our hero who fought them, we cannot see their memorial, we don't even know their grave. And what is sad is this story, this is our own history, we don't know our history ourselves. You understand? So when we were kids, we were taught this history when we were in primary school. By the time we grew up, we forgot. So myself and most of my friends, when I was talking to them, is this movie, African Apocalypse, that sent us back to the future, to the past. So when Rob Lincoln has contacted me regarding this movie, I was like, how long? I learned this history when I was kids. But I was kids, I was learning this history in a language that I don't understand. It was French. You know, as a kid, I was just learning 7 years, 8 years. I don't understand what I was, you know, I only understood that. So white people came to our country, they killed our ancestors, they do a lot of bad things. So it's when I watch this movie, I have to go on the internet and start making research about, you know, about this colonial past. And right now, our country, recently, like last week, there was the UN, United Nations Assembly General. So our president, the new president, he sent his foreign affairs minister, but he was not allowed to talk. Why? Because he said that he's got strong evidence, clear evidence that France is the one supporting terrorists in our country. Then Emmanuel Macron said, no, we don't recognize you guys because this is the military government. But it's very important to remind that this is not our first coup. The last one before this one, this current one, was in 2010. And that time the president, because he was pro-France, he was selling the country to France, they allowed him to go to the UN meeting. That's it. And he met, yes, and he met the former general secretary of UN. So we don't understand now that, you know, the France and the UN said that we cannot send our foreign affairs minister. And this gentleman, he was the previous president, he was the president of the military regime in 2010. So he was welcomed as a hero in France. So there are two kinds of coup d'etat in Africa: revolutionary coup d'etat and reactionary coup d'etat. So when you are like responsible of revolutionary coup d'etat, they see you as they will call you by all names. So in Africa, if you want to say good leader, the good leader is the one that the West is talking bad about him. Yes. But the bad one is the one that they are just praising them, you know. So yeah, and Emmanuel Macron said our president, our current one, he does not recognize it because he's a military. But this is him right now. This is the president, current president of Chad. This gentleman is the current president of Chad. This is Emmanuel Macron sitting next to him. And he invited him in France to listen to his wife. You know. So the reason I'm showing this is because we don't understand the double standard. Yeah. So when you support their interests, you are their best friend. But when you support the interests of the people, you know, you become the enemy number one. So right now the situation, nobody talk about this gentleman. So he's the president of Chad. And right now, this is the president of Niger. They are all military. So in Chad, they allow the foreign minister to intervene at the UN. But in Niger, no, because we say we have clear evidence that France is the one supporting the terrorists. You know? And the one in Chad, even worse, his dad was president, he was ruling the country more than 30 years. He was just in the army. So when his dad passed away, died, was killed by revolutionary movement, there is a constitution in place. The leader of the, how you call it, President Assembly, the leader of Parliament, according to the constitution, is supposed to be the president. And the British, they stopped that constitution. His son, it's like his son becomes president. Nobody's talking about it. You understand? So that's why we don't like this double standard treatment. And right now, this is him, Emmanuel Macron, they become like best friend. And this is Chad, foreign affairs minister, when he was at the UN meeting. And our country, they say, no, you cannot come because we don't recognize militarism. And what is worse, again, when the military, they did the coup, they invite the French ambassador in my country to come for a meeting. And he said, no, I will not recognize you because you are not elected. But in Gabon, because of the imperialists, the same French ambassador, there is an ambassador in France, he went to meet the military guy in Gabon. But in our country, the same also. That's why we don't understand the double standard. And talking about coup d'etat, a lot of people believe that the first coup d'etat in my country was in 1974. That's very wrong, absolutely wrong. The first coup d'etat happened in 1958. I don't know if anyone knows this gentleman, our hero, our leader. Does anyone know this gentleman? No, it's not. Bakari. He's the.
Turn them around for the
Yeah. He's the best friend of Maatubuntuman. They have the same vision, but nobody is talking about him. Even us as Nigerians, we don't know his history because his history is being hidden.
He's the one that said if they start praising me, then I'll betray it. He's the one that made a statement.
Saying what?
He said that, I think this is the one who said that if the enemy, if you hear foreigners saying that I'm a good president, then I'll betray you.
That's right. Yeah, yes. They have the same vision from Sekou Touré. They are best friends. During that time, Sekou Touré of Guinea and Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Jibo Bakari, they have the same vision for Africa, Pan-Africanism. So Jibo Bakari was born in 1922 and he passed away in 1988. He was a socialist politician and an important figure in the independence movement of Niger, Sawaba. Sawaba, which means in our language, wisdom.